In this media, you will learn about bringing the conventions into force and ratification process. Entry into force. Once the proposal is adopted within IMO, the convention can be brought into force by the contracting governments through different processes. The individual governments must accept the convention in a formal manner before bringing the convention into force. Ratification of the convention. A state can submit its consent to be bound by the convention through different ways like signature, ratification, acceptance, approval, and accession. It is generally agreed based on the number of states which needs to ratify the convention for it to come into force when a convention is adopted. Example: the Ballast Water Convention requires minimum 30 states to ratify. These 30 states should represent at least 35% of the world gross tonnage. 47 countries have so far ratified the convention, but their combined gross tonnage represents only 34.56% of the world tonnage. The convention could not be adopted, though more countries have adopted than the minimum required, due to the shortage of tonnage by 0.44% of the world gross tonnage. This means that the convention could be adopted only after the tonnage reaches 35% of the world gross tonnage. Signature. The following are the situations where the consent may be expressed by signature. The treaty also provides that the negotiating states have agreed that signature should have that effect. The state's intention to provide that effect to signature appears from the full powers of its representatives, or it was expressed during the negotiations. The treaty subject to ratification, acceptance, or approval can also be signed by a state. Under that situation, signature does not signify the consent of the state to be bound by the treaty, but it signifies that the state will not go against the convention in any manner. It obliges the state to keep away from acts which might defeat the object and purpose of the treaty till such time it exhibits its intention clearly that it will not become a party to the treaty. Most multilateral treaties consist of a clause which provides that a state can express its consent to be bound by the instrument by signature, subject to ratification. Under such circumstances, signature alone will not be sufficient to bind the state, but it must be followed up by depositing an instrument of ratification with the depositary of the treaty. Accession. Only for a particular period of time, most of the multinational treaties are open for signature. A state which has not signed the treaty during the open for signature period can use a method called accession in order to become a party to the treaty. Accession technically requires the state to deposit an instrument of accession with the depositary. Article 15 of the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties has provided that the consent by accession is allowed when the treaty so provides, or the negotiating states agree that consent by accession could occur. Thus, you have learned about bringing the conventions into force and ratification process.